To order, please. As they are setting up my presentation, I just want to make one or two comments relating to the conversation we had earlier. And these are my two comments. One, in Kenya, we have had major success with respect to farmers, produce, and saving cooperatives. So farmers will get together around, say, marketing tea, marketing coffee. So they have the economies of scale for purpose of accessing the market, efficiency in processing. So it's an easier thing to sell to them the concept of, say, market information, or setting up a commodity exchange. In fact, the coffee sector now is on its way to set up a coffee commodity exchange. And they are working with the ICT authority, which is the equivalent of NITRA, the ICT authority, to help set the electronic exchange. On the issue of innovation, the government has been working, and I've been working very closely with them on this. They are setting up what is called an Enterprise Kenya. The Enterprise Kenya is supposed to create an ecosystem, map the ecosystem of innovation, and look at how do you take an idea, somebody has an idea, to solve or provide a solution to a particular aspect of, say, that involves technology. How do you grow this then to become a product, a service? Yeah, so that is happening, and the idea is that government will not be an investor. It will provide the environment to do that. And finally, there was a comment on skills. I think it's appropriate to talk about skills. One thing we don't do very well is try and anticipate the jobs of the future. If I know about where my economy is going or where I want to go, I need to find what horsepower I need in terms of skills, in terms of organization, in terms of investment, so that it can let me head there. We are not doing very well in doing those mappings so that we can prioritize certain specializations that we need. If we need so many graduates to drive the ICT sector, then we should be able to figure out how many of those positions we need in universities and tertiary colleges to drive that. Those are my comments, and I think my presentation is up. What I'm going to talk to you about is security, and I will be brief. Everything that you do, what they say, there's no gain without a cost. Security is part of what we talk about risk. So we were talking about healthcare in the morning, and I looked at a point where we are gathering a lot of information about people, about their ailment, about where they stay, the lifestyles they lead, the medications they are taking, and so on. So what if somebody had access to this information? What does it mean? What are the implications in terms of what they can do with it? That's disclosure. The next thing we have to think about, suppose the doctor sent via the technology a certain prescription saying it is X amount of milligrams that you take 3 times a day. And someone modified that to say it is Y milligrams that you take 8 times a day or 5 times a day or whatever number. What implication does that have? Those are the things you have to think about. In Kenya, there is a young team that has actually developed an IoT-enabled irrigation mechanism. This thing monitors the soil moisture levels and then activates the water to irrigate the plants. So if I were malicious and managed to break into that system and mess with the way the system works, I can either flood their crops, I can also actually keep the crops dry by changing the parameters. So as we think about IoT, let's also think about what could go wrong. So next slide, please. Next slide. It's not here. I'm not going to talk about myself. She introduced me. Next slide, and then the next one. So the internet, as we know, connects the world using TCP/IP, mainly computing devices. What the Internet of Things does, it goes far and beyond. These are unique devices that compute in different ways, that connect and share information. They share intelligence in order to attain certain kind of objective. Their intelligence, and it's a substantially heterogeneous environment. That is essentially the big difference between the Internet of Things and the traditional internet. So what are we doing? We are connecting people, we are connecting processes. There is data that we collect. There are a lot of things that are connected. All these, if you just imagine how much information we collect here, the complexity of the processes that we need to attain certain things, and the potential it portends for learning, finding solutions, finding things, is huge. Look at the growth. And I borrowed this from a presentation from Cisco. The projection is that there is going to be, by the year 2020, and we saw a similar thing from Google, about 50 billion smart objects, all connected. Just imagine how much intelligence they pack among them, how much knowledge that there is with those 50,000 objects. Here is another thing to think about, and I borrowed this also from Cisco. There is expected to be about 7.1 billion US dollars worth of markets for IoT devices. And my question is, are we producing any IoT devices that we can sell to the world? That's huge. A couple of things to think about the trends. The amount of information that there is huge, given the amount of devices that are talking, that are connected. There is an earlier speaker who talked about other people's intelligence packed in these devices. I mean, regardless of the source of that intelligence, the fact is that these are intelligent devices that are connected, that are self-regulated, that are talking, and they are sharing information. So there is a need to think about how this information, all shared, how can we use it? What trends can we discern? Suppose they go rogue. So if I create a program that I plan there that takes advantage of this intelligence, that causes rogue behavior of these devices, what does it mean to us? How do these devices self-protect to ensure that the integrity of the information they have, the intelligence that they carry, is not, its integrity remains? So there's a huge opportunity for big data analytics. And then the whole thing of how do you connect all these billions of devices? Energy. It's a big thing. And Andy Chen talked about it yesterday. But they need to be smart in the way they use energy. They need to be efficient in the way they use energy. In Africa here, we are not meeting our energy demands. we are talking IoT, are we build that base? And then they also miniaturization. These devices will be tiny to be planted into things so that they become part of that big object that they relate to. And then the devices are autonomous. Now, a couple of barriers. There is the governance thing, the global discussion on how do we manage this thing? Because IoT is global. What rules apply? What laws apply? What protocols do we use? What frameworks do we utilize? Those are questions that are going on. And who manages this? Is it the private sector? Or do we get together and become another UN for IoT? Those are governance things that must be addressed. If we leave it to the private sector, what does it mean for the common person? Private sector is largely driven by profit. What does it mean to the people, like on this continent, who are so far out of reach of these private sector consortia that may emerge? And then the whole thing, how do you address these things? These are more technical things that an organization like IEEE will address. How do you get your unique address in this space? Today, the IP system that uses IP4 is about exhausted in terms of addressing. But you are talking about 50 billion addresses now where there has to be this unique advice. So if you're addressing information to me, I'm an Abuja living in Abuja, I must be uniquely identifiable in this system. Those are governance issues that are being addressed. The other thing is security and privacy, and that is what I will talk about, as I alluded to in the beginning. The whole thing about the security of information, we have seen today, there are a lot of horror stories being told about security. A couple of weeks ago, guys broke into the SWIFT system. You know SWIFT? The one for transferring money globally? They broke into the SWIFT system and went into the Bangladesh government account in the Federal Reserve Bank in the USA and gave instructions to disperse 800 million US dollars to various agencies across the globe. And, the transactions were lined up, they started flowing, until one hitch happened, which was they had misspelled, remember, they had misspelled a name of a particular recipient organization. So somebody was keen, and they missed one letter. And they started looking at these transactions and says, who initiated them? Government of Bangladesh. Maybe we should hold all other transactions that have not executed. But by that time, $80 million had already been transferred. That's a SWIFT system, perhaps the most secure system you can think about. In the US recently, there's something called ransomware. Ransomware is where I send you a link, and it looks like it is inviting you to do something interesting. So you click on the link, and once you click on the link, it encrypts your hard drive. Your entire hard drive gets encrypted. And then I send you a message to say, in order to get the key to encrypt your hard drive, I need this money. So you pay by credit card, or you pay by Bitcoins. The closer, I give you a timeline. The closer we get to the timeline, the higher the amount goes. So there was this one hospital, I believe it's in Pennsylvania, I could be wrong, where one of the employees, unaware that this was ransomware happening, clicked on that link. And the impact was, it encrypted the entire computing system of that hospital. So doctors couldn't get patient information, human resource couldn't get employee information, the finance department couldn't do literally that hospital ground to a halt. And they were told, we want $90,000. It needs to be paid within this time. Otherwise, we escalate it. If you exceed that deadline, then we destroy the data. What do? They actually paid. And they paid this company looking for bitcoins to pay, because with bitcoins, it's not then easy to trace the hackers. So security is a big thing. The other thing is also privacy. Privacy of information. Privacy, the basic principle goes like this. There is information you know about me, who I am, my address, my age, where I live, my financial information, health information. If you have this information, then I have a right to determine how you use this information. That's the essence of privacy. If you're a hospital and you have taken diagnostic information about me, then the idea is that you are going to use that information for purposes of my health. If you use it for any other purpose, then it's my right to say no. Or you have to seek that consent. That's the basic element of privacy. Privacy assumes that the owner of the information has control on how that information is used. So if we take the conversation that was here in the morning regarding this beautiful system that takes healthcare to the people, and I'm a malicious, and I get hold of this information about this 90-year-old lady who can't come to the hospital, and then I use it in a manner that she never intended, I publicize it. Maybe she's suffering for something that people should know about. How many of us ail in ways that we don't want the public to know? So, if I get in there and publicize this information or interfere with it, what does that mean? Privacy is a big thing. In the rest of Africa, we haven't really moved to have proper legislation to manage privacy. If you go to North America, for example, in the USA, they have the HIPAA Act that governs how you handle and protect health-related information. They also have, in Canada, the Privacy Act, complete with governance, including provincial privacy officers that ensure compliance. In this region, I believe South Africa has a law that came into being under the King's Commission some time back. Other countries were catching up, even as we move on. Security is a big thing, so I'm going to focus on it and then talk about what we need to do. So yesterday, we had a good lesson on security. I don't want to repeat it for those who are here. Confidentiality is meaning you keep things confidential except for those that are authorized. Integrity means the information should remain what it is. It should not be changed other than by those authorized. So if I have a bank account that lists 100 naira, it should not change to 100 or 99 naira without authorization. Availability means information be available when it's required, and the privacy, I have just talked about it. The other things like identification. How do you identify that it's me that is asking for this? How do you authenticate? Meaning, how do you affirm that it's me? And then how do you authorize? So, I'm authorized to access this account to read the value or the balance in that account. Can I do something more? Am I authorized? So authorization gives you the scope of things to do. In the IoT world, if I'm communicating with you, what is it that you can exchange with me? So when you create that object, the IoT world, and the information that it encapsulates. And there is this exchange of information. How much of it can it exchange with me? And how do you assure that it's me who is authorized to exchange that information with? Accountability is the whole issue. How do you trace back the acts of who did what? So if you look at in the banking sector, when somebody, the teller, for example, is updating your account, there is always a log. It's always a log. There's an audit trail. But you're talking about 50 billion objects out there. How do we build this to ensure that the original command came from this object or this person from this country in this jurisdiction under these laws? Accountability is a big thing. And then attribution and non-repudiation, so that if I do something, I cannot deny it. That's non-repudiation. I did it, and I cannot deny it. So all these things are things to grapple with, and how do we build them into this complex infrastructure of objects, of 50 billion of them? So the idea basically with respect to information is protects unauthorized access, unauthorized modification, denial of service, malicious software. Malicious software, there we mean the viruses that can alter things. The spyware that listens to you and reveals information that is not authorized. The worms that just cause traffic and make it difficult for you to operate. And then ransomware, which I've talked about. And then, what is the impact of a breach? For example, the case we had with the medical issue in the morning here. What would be the impact if somebody had access to all that information pertaining to all the patients under this system? What could they do with it? Intended for the good or malicious? What could that is the impact that we are talking about. So generally in information security, the idea is to say, if, for example, in the traditional security sense, in a bank, if you go and disclose the salary of or the holding of somebody and put it in the press, there will be reputational loss, the bank might be fined, and there may be a court case, and all this remedy, libel issues may arise, people may be fired. Those are impacts. So how do we deal with such impacts in the IoT world? When, for example, the breach originated in Brazil, and I live in Abuja. So what protocols exist, or what remedies exist? You really have to think about also this in an international framework where you are able to deal with such issues, where you have people that are trained, where you have the relationships that allow you for exchange of information. And it goes from technical people to law enforcement to all the other things pertaining to diplomatic relations, because we are talking beyond borders. Things to deal with security, we need policies. The general governance, how do we deal with this? The laws, the policies follow, the regulations, then the standards. The standards, not basically standards pertaining to devices on how they communicate on a technical level, but standards around how we operate things. In information security, for example, we have the ISO 27001 standard that applies in an organization. But now, IoT is beyond organization. So we have to think about how we deal with those. In fact, I teach a class on information security, and one assignment I gave out, I haven't seen the results, was to say, how would you conduct an audit in an IoT infrastructure to ensure that the objectives set with respect to how devices perform, how they relate, that there are no violations pertaining to security, for example. How do you ensure that I cannot maliciously modify the code, the programs that execute, so that they have outcomes that are different from what's desired? So how do you audit this? How do you assure this, that the system works as designed? What testing do we require to ensure that? And then we have guidelines and the standards. So other things are fiscal access. So my friends that are doing the irrigation scheme, they have fiscal devices. We need fiscal access control. Who has actually access to those? What can they do? I could go there, switch it off. That is availability. But I may go there and exchange the memory card. What does that mean? Those are things to think about. Secure operating systems, secure coding practices. When I write programs, I need them to be sound so that they cannot be hacked easily. Anti-malware software and proper configuration. So when I configure this, do I configure it appropriately? The access control mechanisms I use, are they appropriate? Can they be guessed? We had an interesting case where the Twitter accounts of our armed forces and the deputy president were taken over, and there was a lot of propaganda at the time, some that were very embarrassing. So if you're in this situation and I take over, say, an object that is doing something critical, think of critical infrastructure. Critical infrastructure is things like telecommunications that we can't do without, energy. Like in cities, you are talking about the traffic lights, the water systems. So I take over the program, say, that is running your water distribution systems in a smart city. What can I do with that? Put more chlorine. I may command that program to do. Or shut these valves, and you cause unrest in that part of the location. The telecoms, give it a blackout. Jam the signal. Things like those. Those are some of the things we have to think about. How do we configure these devices to make sure that they are secure? The point about IoT, and I think if you have been with me, you realize that it substantially increases what we call the attack surface. Before, if you are an organization, you know your scope, you know your limit. But we are now a series of interconnected devices, 50 billion of us. So, if I'm a hacker, this is field day. It's like a kid in a candy store. You know, I can now play. The attack surface is huge. And then the threats are diverse. Remember, these objects are doing different things. You have objects pertaining to agriculture, healthcare, financial services, and other things. So the kind of threats that are there now are multiple, but they pertain to the same ecosystem. If I enter through one object, then it's likely I can devastate the entire ecosystem. Think about it. The impact and risk can be huge. The impact that I could cause, and it can be devastating. And then remediation is a challenge, because how do you remedy this? And this is a conversation this is what I was saying earlier. Somebody has hacked you from Argentina, Brazil. How do you get remedy in an environment where probably you don't have the protocols to manage that process? And I suppose it just affects the lives of people. How do you solve those? The protocols that go with this. Compliance and regulation, all these are big things. So, I'm not trying to scare you, but these are things to think about as we go into this unpredictable world of intelligence devices, 50 billion of them, spread all over the world, doing different things, in different areas and of different importance. Security is not a new problem, but the IoT issue complicates the matter because of massive deployment, automatic connection. You see, there's this thing that, so if there's this object that communicates with the other object, what are the handshakes that go with it before they connect? And can I reject a connection request from what I think is an insecure object? Insecure devices. Right now, I tell you, and with all due respect to my colleagues who teach computer science, a lot of teaching goes around make this program work. It's functionality focus. Can it do this function? Can it compute so that once you have input, you get output that's reliable, that is predictable? A lot of it doesn't involve really talking about the safety of the program, the security of the data, and how that can potentially be manipulated so that A plus B is not what you intended. And then auditability, I think I mentioned. And then the consumer perspective. You see, most of the world is not even aware of the potential misuse of the information about themselves. The old mama in some rural location giving all her information about herself to this medical services company, all she cares is to be treated. But she's not aware of the risk that this information could be used to. So the consumer aspect of this is not even featured. Because we, as experts, go design things, they work, but how about the consumer? Are we taking care of their interests? And then the world, as these things develop, we don't have an overall IoT framework. The challenges are this. With one device broken, you can compromise an entire system. If you have 1 million devices interconnected that have developed trust relationship, I break one, I enter that trust, I can disrupt you accordingly. Developers of devices and applications need to have a collective responsibility. And this is something that we sometimes don't train. So when you design an app pertaining to a particular aspect, do you have the ethics, the intention, the good intention to think all around about it needs to achieve the objective it was meant without harming anyone else, without causing undue problems, undue harm, undue loss? Those are things that we need to train our developers. And traditional frameworks do not hold. They can't, because it's a new world. So, what do you need to protect? And this is a slide I borrowed from some other place. What do you need to protect? So, the things that pertain to information, say smartphones. If I'm somebody on a pacemaker that is internet-enabled for purposes of my doctor monitoring my health, what would happen? Things around the home that are predictable. So if people break into this, they can even predict my times, when I'm home, when I'm not, so they plan accordingly. The Wi-Fi stuff that we do, all these things are things that we have to think about. This is another set you can think about. By the way, look at the webcam. This is very common, yeah? People actually can spy on you without you realizing. You remember that thing I told you about? You get a link, it says click here, you might install something interesting, and you install, but they have actually activated your, how most PCs have cameras. They can see exactly what you're doing, monitor you whenever you're on the computer and doing things. And take your pictures as well. That's a privacy concern. Billing and fraud. So if they can monitor things to do with metering of or billing, they can interfere with that. And other things. Irrigation mechanisms I talked about. Critical infrastructure I mentioned. So if I enter your grid, your smart grid, what can I do if I'm malicious? Modern cars. There was a case in the USA where hackers actually managed to break into a car remotely and simply stop it. So you are driving on the highway, presumably going at maximum speed, 100 kilometers per hour, and the car stalls. You're stepping on the gas pedal, nothing happens. But this car is being controlled remotely. You could cause havoc. You could actually hold cities to ransom, countries to ransom, and you are not even in that country. You're somewhere else. So these are other examples. Privacy, I think I mentioned that. There is that information asymmetry. We who get information about people, about devices, about, for example, I work in the bank, I get information about you. The other person is not as well informed about potentially what this information could be used to. So there is that asymmetry. And then the information that comes in gets aggregated with other information. And you know how you aggregate information, you can derive other inferences. So I gather information about your mobile information, your bank information, your spouse information. I put it all together. I can actually learn more about you than you intended me to learn. Those are privacy things. Issues of inference. We have in security a saying that says if you take 1 + 1, it's not actually 2. It's greater than 2. Because if I put those two things together, I can infer more information than was intended in the two components. Intrusive identification, and patterns and profiling. And you cannot remain anonymous. And I think a speaker mentioned here in the morning, you cannot be anonymous in this world, even if you desire. So you are open book. And other weak points pertaining to security is not simply the device that I can hack. It's also the communication link that transmits this information. It's also how the other object receiving this information treats my information. So all those things. The entire ecosystem has to be rethought through. The things to think about, and I got this quote from an MIT prof, and he said human beings must adapt to collaborate with machines. So our thinking has been we are collaborating with human beings, but now we have intelligent machines. And when the collaboration happens, the end result is stronger. It is stronger because the aggregation of the information, say, exchange in this collaboration is of much higher value. The things to think about, and for those that attend international forums, please, these are some of the things, in my view, that needs to be addressed. Governance. What are the legal frameworks that we need globally? If this organization is going to be a private consortium managing IoT, what are the legal frameworks around how things happen, how information transmitted, the custody of that information, the ownership, the accountability, the traceability? If it's a UN system, how do we build it into the current UN system so that it works properly? Nationally, and regionally, we have to think about appropriate legislation. Today, I think on the continent, there are like 6 countries that have passed laws on cybercrime. Now, imagine now going to parliamentarians to talk about IoT legislation. You know, it's a tall order. But we have to start thinking about that. And these laws that we make nationally also need to be consistent with global protocols and global frameworks. So national laws have to be thought about. And these have to be harmonized internationally. You have to think about standards. How do these operate? Interoperability of these standards. And then these standards must include security and privacy. In fact, the ISO 27001 that we use, that has been in place for the last about 10, 15 years, needs to be revisited for purpose of accommodating IoT. This is a fairly technical slide, and this is a proposal also came from Cisco, where they are saying that you have now to think about something different in the way you do things. So, at the application level, you think security. When you come to the interface and the handoffs of information, you wouldn't build security in those handoffs. And the application level as well. And the infrastructure and the device. So if you consistently think from device to the infrastructure, to the application enablement, to the business level, and along this, build the necessary security. For example, at device level, think about encryption, end-to-end. At the application-centric level, think about having device-level security that you can't tamper with. Physical security. And then at the application interfaces, think about network security. And at that level, the cloud, think about how to secure that in a consistent, systematic manner that is different from what we have been doing. What we've been doing in organization is say, here is my perimeter. Anything that will be allowed in must meet these standards. But now, here, perimeter makes no sense. Organizational perimeter makes no sense. So, this is So, for us, and I'm winding up, I'm told time is up. And people are tired. And I've talked too long. Is that so? Okay, back to where we are. I'm finishing. So we need to be part of these conversations. And I'm really glad one of our speakers talked about being part of the team in the World Conference on IoT. More of us need to be there so that we can articulate our interests, understand our challenges, and ensure that the frameworks that are designed, the governance that comes out, also captures and takes care of interests, our unique challenges as we face them. In terms of governments and others, I think we need to think strategically, position ourselves in how we can benefit from this IoT, and identify priority areas where IoT can help us. We can't do everything, everywhere. For example, IoT with education. Education has some major issue: healthcare, agriculture, national security. These are areas probably where we need to prioritize. And if we do, the outcome will be that the investments will follow. The tax investment will follow. To say, I'm going to use IoT to improve agriculture, so I'm going to invest in massive skills development in agriculture-related IoT. That has to be the thing, because the investment you need to solve all the problems in all the sectors with this IoT may end up spread too thin. We need to think about investment in skills. And skills that where we need to invest, we can't only think about the technical skills of things that we develop there, but we need to think about leadership. People who understand technology, its impacts, is used to enhance economy and so at that level. We need to invest in government and legal regulatory compliance frameworks. We need people to understand this. We need technical, deep technical skills. And for me, what we really should do is say, University of Ile-Ife or Kaduna or wherever, we are giving you X amount of money to churn out X number of skills with this experience that will solve these problems. And they hold them to account. So that now, if I choose to go in an area that's priority area, I get scholarship. I go study. I become part of a team to solve these things. Outcomes are engineered. In fact, we have a saying that when you see things that are glamorous and they are all there, they didn't happen by happenstance. They didn't just appear. They were engineered. Somebody did the groundwork, did the thought, put in the effort and time to create that outcome. So we need to think about that. We need to invest in innovation ecosystems. If you look at the brains around here, and you see, you how many? 180 million? These are active minds. On an ongoing basis, they have things they are thinking about. So where is think space? Where you can sit people around and they thrash out the ideas are panel beaten, and then navigated through the process of becoming true products, true services, true companies that now can invest, can hire people. I mentioned in the beginning that in Kenya, they have started what's called Enterprise Kenya to manage the innovation ecosystem. Purely to say, here are the ideas that I have. And they are at idea stage, they have done a pilot, they have done a prototype, what their needs are X, Y, Z. And there's an investor who comes along and says, I'm looking to invest my money in this kind of thing. And then try and match those. Intellectual property. So we have these ideas, but have you secured it? Or are you going to talk about it openly, and someone goes and secures the IP ahead of you, and then they come to you to implement the idea, because they have no idea how to implement it. Intellectual property. And where do you get angel investors? So government may inject money early in this game to prove an idea, and then throw it to the private sector. So innovation ecosystems are areas that we really need to put money into. Research and development, there is very, very weak, and I don't know about Nigeria, but in my country, industry, academia, linkages are extremely weak. A guy goes, teaches a course, kids graduate, they're in the streets, they are not employable. Now you have to think about giving them internship. A year, 2 years, before they become employable. How about that collaboration? How about academia understanding priorities of industry? And this pertains to the entire skill set that we are talking about with respect to IoT, including information security. And government academia collaboration, so that things are aligned with national priorities. Global collaboration. I think we need to be on the table to understand where everyone else is going, so that we also have that global perspective to ensure that it's injected into our visioning of things. And then infrastructure to run this, because IoT is not going to run in isolated environment, a infrastructure that is not robust and so on. Those are things to think about. Other things, laws and regulations, those are things we need to think about. And deepen security expertise for security-related things. We need expertise. We need those guys who can design code that is secure. Build devices that are tamper-proof. We need those guys at the technical level. We need people who think about how do you organize the entire system so that you can come with secure outcomes, whether you're talking about processes, whether you're talking about devices, and then governance. And then think about, as a nation, as a people, how do we create a framework, security frameworks that are risk-based, so that we are not creating frameworks for the sake of it, that they really take into account the reality of if things go wrong, what would be the impact? And that the investments in the solutions, security solutions, are commensurate to potential impact if something were to go wrong. That is security-based frameworks. So that's my talk. I hope I didn't scare you.